All right. We have our Pioneer metagame update going into September of 2025. So as we can see, as we are all aware, Mono Red Aggro continues to be the most played and probably best deck in the format. It is the deck with the most success when there is more chips on the line. The play rate goes higher. Looking at challenges, Mono Red tends to be about 25% of the metagame. For leagues, about 20% of the metagame. Going into Magic Arena, for folks really trying to rank up and get into Mythic, it tends to be very popular as well. The likelihood of a Platinum or Diamond player when I'm paired into them as a Mythic ranked player being mono red is much higher than other decks. It is just what people are doing in order to try to level up and get further on the ladder. The core Heartfire Hero, Soulscar Mage is a little bit less common. Usually I'm pretty happy if my opponent is playing a Soulscar Mage. But curving out Heartfire Hero, Kumano into Emberheart Challenger, Manifold Mouse, and then pushing through with Monstrous Rages is a very powerful combo. In this format, it's very challenging for decks to deal with. Interestingly, Slickshot Showoff being one of the best aggro cards ever printed, potentially, seeing nearly zero play because the consistency of cards that just get bigger or synergize with Manifold Mouse is just too good to pass up. And then, of course, Screaming Nemesis, just by far the most powerful aggro creature at this point. If you're going to spend 3 mana on a spell, you want the spell to win the game. Screaming Nemesis is extremely challenging to push through. We have Rakdos midrange, we have Mono Black midrange. These two are very common on Arena. Mono Black having a surge in recent challenge results. As we can see, the last challenge took 2nd, 8th, 12th, 14th. 4 spots in the top 16 is pretty good. And then the previous challenge, again, 2 in the top 8. Mono Black midrange is doing very well. The curve out that they're really trying to achieve is curving a 2-drop into a 3-drop that will disrupt the opponent. And then, of course, drawing additional cards with Unholy Annex. The red-black deck does the same thing. Most of the cards are going to be the same across, except the 2-drop spot is typically more powerful. In Bloodtithe Harvester and Fear of Missing Out over Gifted Aetherborn. For a deck like Scapeshift, which is what I'm playing, the red 3-drops provide more pressure, and red-black is typically a more challenging matchup because they play more of them. Similar amount of discard. The trade-off is, of course, fewer Invoke Despairs in the main deck for the red-black versus the mono-black deck. Going into Greasefang as a very interesting and cool deck. I'm not having any difficulties with it, but for some reason the community seems to think that this is the worst matchup for Simic Scapeshift. We'll take a look at the spreadsheet in a couple minutes, but I don't see how that is. Greasefang has great high roll potential, but so does Simic Scapeshift, and the likelihood that Greasefang high rolls you is about the same. They're a little bit more likely to put a bust into play on turn 3, but if they're on the draw, you might just kill them on your turn 4. So a lot of play draw dependencies with Greasefang, and being able to partner up Disruption with a very powerful and fast kill, and being able to very consistently discard their threats, and knowing what they're keeping instead of trying to mill into their Parhelions has been very powerful. The addition of Sheltered by Ghosts to a deck like this allows for a much better fair plan, and really adds a good element to their disruptive package in their Thoughtseize and their Fatal Pushes. A Mardu list is also very common, but if we scroll through results, we don't really see very many Mardu decks populating Magic Online. On Magic Arena, going green or going red is fairly common. Into the blue-white control list here is the premier control deck in the format. Um, this deck is very, very strong. There's a couple different ways that it can be constructed. Some folks like Censor. Most folks don't seem to be in on Censor. The exact count of Planeswalkers varies a little bit depending on how big the deck wants to go. Typically, it tends to be a little bit more lower curve without quite this many Planeswalkers and really pushing into the Marches, the Get Losts, the Dovin's Vetoes to push the game a little bit further. Make Disappear is a card that I've seen in several lists, and it can be quite challenging to get through the 8 counter magic spells. But when they're really just sitting on 4 main deck, um, plus change the equation, I guess, it can be pretty trivial to eventually push through. Um, Blue-white is a deck that gains a lot from their sideboard, and the exact configuration of the sideboard is going to change and going to be different for every player you play against. Um, Shark Typhoon's in the sideboard confused me a little bit here, but I'm sure there's a good reason for it. Maybe he was anticipating quite a few mirrors. The deck that is really winning for the last few months, coming from being pretty much a meme until one of the recent challenges hitting third, is the Boros Hammer Time list. This is getting much closer to the way the modern list looks. We're up to Mox Ambers now with Skrells to try to really power that out. I don't know why they would play Skrells instead of Zach Fair, but I don't play this deck. Um, Overall, the addition of Corey Steelcutter really adds a brand new light for these equipment tutor effects. Um, Cloud being able to get a Colossus Hammer for an immediate KO, or be able to get a Corey Steelcutter to prolong the game and provide a consistent stream of threats is very, very powerful. Corey Steelcutter also providing trample for a Colossus hammered up dude is a core sequence of the deck, trying to pair both of these together and really punch through. Um, Sigarda's Aid is something that is less and less necessary, especially since we have gotten so much redundancy on creatures that are able to equip themselves recently. And a sideboard of a reasonable amount of disruption, but mostly protection, really shows what this deck is trying to accomplish. It's trying to make its turns its own turns. It's trying to be more of a combo deck than an aggro deck, but it does offer a very potent aggro backup plan if it is not able to assemble the Sigarda's Aid double Colossus Hammer line. The most recent challenge, of course, won by Golgari Food. The Ygritte decks are getting better as people are playing more and more of them and figuring it out. The real card here is Scavenger's Talent. Being able to invest a card on turn 1 that will eventually win the game, leveling it up and being able to cycle your cat back and forth with your Witch's Oven to mill through 2/3 of your deck, and then just pop this on a level 3 and put a Ygritte into play with 2 cats in the graveyard is a very powerful sequence. It's very hard to disrupt decks like this that just go from very little potency to all of a sudden being able to mill 15 cards and win themselves the game. And that's a core game plan of Simic Scapeshift as well. But let's look at the spreadsheet here. So in August of 2025, I played 228 matches in Mythic. I won 161, lost 67, for a total win rate of 70%. Initially trying a stock list from MTGO that I ripped from Twitter and not performing very well. This has led to a strong dislike of stock up in general. I decided to stick it out with 50 matches and by the end of it was not sure if anybody should actually be playing this deck for any reason. Moving into adding our Boreal Grazers, trimming on Glimpses, eventually throwing in Aftermath Analysts, we're able to significantly increase the win rate and finish the month at 114. But we can see Mono Red, most represented deck at 25, Rakdos 22, Mono Black 21, then we get Blue White behind all of the black mid-range decks. And the win rate for a good deck, one of the most appealing things to me when I'm testing out a deck is if it beats all of the random decks, if its matchup in the other category is very, very high, and if it has a very, very favored matchup against decks that are reasonably common. In the lower tiers, Angels is far more common than it is a Mythic, but it's a matchup that is pretty challenging to lose if you are sequencing your lands correctly in order to really optimize your outs at winning the game. Um, for Mono Red, very play draw dependent, 60%, especially after sideboarding when you do have access to disruption like Into the Flood mod, Shauna's. No, Ether Gust, we're not bringing in Shauna's Tidebinder in this matchup. Just to try to force them to invest their Monstrous Rages and then return that creature to their hand to prevent them from killing your blocker and also dealing damage is very potent and can really buy enough time to be able to win on the draw. Mono Red has cards that I've forgotten the name of it, but deals 4 to target creature and 2 damage to a creature you control. That card is very powerful if you are trying to go through a Wandering Minstrel. It can be pretty challenging to win with Minstrel versus Spelunking, but you do need the redundancy in this matchup in order to be able to have a hand that hopes to Goldfish at turn 4. Rakdos midrange. Stockup is an all-star here. Nis is an all-star here. Just trying to push through and get enough threats and get a timely board presence. Same with Mono Black. If they're able to cast Go Blanks and Lily out of the Veil when you don't have anything going on, then you're probably going to lose that game. You do need your deck to be in a favorable order. You do need to have your deck give you things in a correct sequence in a lot of spots where they've discarded you out and you need to hit land, then Lumra. But the odds of hitting a land and then a payoff is not too small. But you do end up doing a lot of YOLO Scapeshifts, trying to mill yourself into a bear with a Spelunky in play to win that game. Blue-White, a very fun matchup. Blue-White is a good example of a deck that doesn't kill you. You can do whatever you want. I'm going to post, my next video is going to be a back-to-back against Blue-White control. And my Blue-White opponents did a few things that I strongly disagree with in those matchups and allowed me to execute a combo. But typically this matchup ends when you're able to just naturally deck yourself out with Ports of Carfell on their end step, and then pop a Thassa's Oracle into play. Phoenix, a matchup that's pretty good overall, I think. Our Boreal Grazer is really good in this matchup because you want to be able to get your Spelunky into play underneath Spell Pierce. And then the other category, this is random aggro decks, like Black-Red Speed. It is Merfolk, it is a bunch of different random things. Random control decks, weapons manufacturing decks, all kind of fit into the other. It's decks that I don't expect to see more than one time, and I didn't see them more than one time this month. But Greasefang, back to my comment on this page here. I don't know why the community struggles with this matchup as much as they do. The Thoughtseizes are a huge pain, and the high roll is also a very scary threat. But you just have so many ways to disrupt them back, right? Like just catching them with a Heritage Reclamation. They like the black-white builds with Monument to Endurance they need to naturally find their Parhelion in order to discard it, right? They're not milling 5 or 6 cards in a turn. They're not playing Grisly Salvages or cash grabs to accelerate the rate at which they get towards their vehicles. So being able to disrupt their vehicles or disrupt their Greasefang just keeps things off the table and keeps you from dying. Tishana's Tiebinder is also an all-star in the matchup. It can be difficult for them to have Revolt to be able to kill the Tiebinder um, if you're able to counter and keep the vehicle out of play. Angels, difficult to lose the matchup. Prowess, very, very close. There's a couple different Prowess builds. The blue-red one and the VV Cauldron one are very difficult. They might be more difficult than Mono Red, but I'm uncertain at this time. I haven't played enough matches of it to really know for sure. Demir, this is Rogues. Mr. Mental Math on Reddit has caught me at least at least twice, maybe all three of my losses. Um, the tempo style decks are really going to be a struggle for the Simic Scapeshift list. Um, Domain Overlords, 5-color Niv, white-black midrange. These are just control decks that aren't really trying to kill you. They'll like play things that can end the game, but they're not trying to kill you fast enough. You can reasonably just pop a Thassa's Oracle into play after naturally decking yourself out with no untapper in these matchups. Or you can set yourself up to be able to double Portacarfel, to be able to win through removal fairly easily. Vanishing Burst is annoying, but it's not just, it's very telegraphed and it's pretty easy to play around. Um, Elves, they either get you or they don't. Rakdos Sack, they either get you or they don't. Mono Green either gets you or they don't. A Mayhem Devil out of Rakdos Sack is a premier hate permanent. Um, it's a hate permanent that does not die to Beseiju, and it is extremely challenging to have enough mana to be able to Otawara and also do more things in time, because they will kill you slightly faster than the red-black midrange, and their disruption is pretty close to the same with the addition of the Mayhem Devil. Red Green Legends, I was surprised that this was a deck, but it looks really cool when it wins. Boggles, same thing, it's just a straight aggro deck, doesn't really do much to disrupt you. If they spend an entire turn playing Rest in Peace, they're spending an entire turn not trying to kill you. And that buys you enough time to be able to hit the additional land drop to Scapeshift for a Beseiju and kill them. The mirror match is the mirror match. Quintorius is just a race. Typically, Simic lands a little bit faster, and Quintorius lacks the disruption of creativity. Creativity also, if they put their demon into play, just like putting Quintorius into play, you can't win anymore. It turns off your graveyard. You can't remove it because the odds of you having 3 non-land permanents sacrifice are extremely low. But creativity has better disruption, and it's a very good censor deck. Simic Lands often wants to be playing on curve in order to be able to progress the game state to meet the race. So censor ends up being extremely punishing. Spirits, very similar to creativity. A reasonable clock, but also an excess of disruption. Spirits is very much a nightmare matchup. The one win that I have against them, I took advantage of openings that were 30-40% to get there, and I got there in game 1 and 3 on a low percentage Scapeshift. But Convoke, every time I play against Convoke, they seem to line up a turn 3 Goldfish, and I need to chump block with something, and then either I am able to win the game or I can't. I haven't seen any lackluster Convoke hands. The deck looks very, very impressive to me, but I'm sure over a larger sample size, there is quite a failure rate with the deck. Convoke also tends to be playing sideboard haymakers that a mono red or classic aggro deck won't. Convoke is very likely to be playing Ghost Vacuums and Rest in Pieces and other things out of the sideboard. Um, and then this is Leyline of Resonance Red. Never beaten this deck. Probably won't beat this deck in a best of three. I've won games against it. Um, but this deck is basically the reason why I don't track best of ones. It is extraordinarily popular in best of ones, and it's one of the reasons why I recommend not playing Simic Scapeshift in best of one, because it is not a deck that you're likely to play in paper. It is not a deck you're likely to play at a long, high stakes tournament, because the odds of running hot with a deck like this for 8 to 15 rounds is very low. But you are going to get a lot of people with best of one hand smoothing. Um, then Humans is Humans, Hidden Strings. Um, I posted a match against Hidden Strings, and the opponent gave up because they didn't understand how good their cards were. Um, this matchup I expect to be quite difficult. They have access to good disruption, but they are slower. Game one should be quite favored for you, but post sideboard should be difficult. Black Green Beans, this is just a control deck that doesn't attempt to win the game. Hammer, some things from Hammer can kind of fall apart. It can be very, very impressive, and it can do this really powerful turn two draw. Um, but most of the time, it's going to try to like put things together and weave through a very resilient turn five kill. Um, and like it's going to try to beat the aggro decks by tutoring up a Shadow Spear, right? Like decks that have very good plans for the aggro decks and have ways to succeed there. Um, this one is Shadow Spear. Angels is the cleric. Um, but these things do not prevent Simic Scapeshift from succeeding in that matchup. Um, Green Stompy, Abzan, Temur Battlecrier. This deck's really cool. And then there's quite a few enchantment decks that I saw a lot more in July that I did not see in August. Maybe a little bit lower down on the totem pole. Um, they do pop up a lot more often. But yeah, quick side note on Rona. Never beaten this deck. I've got like 6 matches against this deck since July, and this is probably the most consistent, fastest combo deck in the format. Is just mono blue Rona, and I don't think that a resilient combo like Simic Lands is likely to get there on it. But anyway, this is the spreadsheet. This is my results from August in 2025. Looking forward to a fresh start in September. Thanks so much.